Hey, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into the story of Amazon Redshift, a service that became the fastest growing in AWS history. But the reason for its wild success isn't what you'd probably guess. It's actually a story about a really simple idea that completely changed the game. All right, let's get into it. So let's kick things off with a massive question, one that really sets the stage for everything we're going to talk about. Just think about the insane amount of information being generated every single second. So why is it that most of that data gets collected, gets stored, and then never actually gets used to make a single decision? Well, that question leads us directly to this idea of dark data. It's the core reason why so much priceless information just goes to waste, and it was a huge, huge problem for businesses everywhere. So what exactly is dark data? Well, you can think of it like a digital treasure chest that nobody ever bothers to open. It's all that valuable info companies are sitting on. Click streams, server logs, customer feedback, and it just sits there collecting digital dust. And here's the real kicker. This problem wasn't static. It was getting worse every single day. The amount of data being collected was absolutely exploding, but the tools to make sense of it all, they were kind of stuck in the past. That gap between what we had and what we could actually use was quickly becoming a massive chasm. So what was the culprit here? For a long, long time, the main tool for any serious data analysis was something called a data warehouse. And honestly, it was a bit of a monster to deal with. The source paper we're looking at today points to four huge barriers. First, cost. And we're not talking about a small expense. We're talking millions of dollars in hardware and software licenses just to get in the door. Second, complexity. You needed a whole team of highly specialized database admins just to keep the lights on. Third, performance. These things would often just grind to a halt as your data started to grow. And finally, rigidity. They were built for neat, clean, structured data, not the messy, semi-structured stuff of the modern internet. And this is where Amazon Redshift walks onto the stage. It didn't just show up with a slightly better piece of technology. Nope. It came in with a completely different philosophy, a radical bet on one single powerful idea: simplicity. Okay, this is really the heart of the whole story. Most people look back and think Redshift won because it was cheap, or maybe because it had some fancy new architecture. And yeah, those things were factors, for sure, but they weren't the secret sauce. The real breakthrough was a relentless, almost obsessive focus on making things simple. This quote from a customer in the paper just hits the nail on the head. It perfectly captures the feeling. People didn't want to spend their days managing, tuning, and basically fighting with their database. They just wanted to ask their data questions and get answers. And this is such a critical insight. Redshift wasn't really trying to steal customers away from the big legacy players like Oracle. They were going after a much, much bigger prize. All those companies that weren't doing any data analysis at all, simply because it was too difficult and expensive. They weren't just competing in an existing market, they were creating a brand new one. So how did they do it? How did they take this big idea of simplicity and turn it into a real game-changing product? Well, let's take a look. They followed this really clear set of design principles. First, they wanted to obliterate the cost of just trying it out. You could start for free or pay by the hour, no big upfront commitment. Second, they obsessed over minimizing the time to your first answer, getting that journey from sign-up to first query down to just a few minutes. Third, minimize administration. Backups, patching, failure detection, all of it automated. And finally, minimize tuning. They worked to get rid of all the complex knobs and dials, making the system smart enough to just configure itself. And this chart just says it all, doesn't it? A super common task like resizing your data warehouse to add more capacity. In the old world, that could take weeks, maybe even months of procurement, installation, and configuration. With Redshift, you click a button. The entire process, even for a massive system, takes less than 30 minutes. It's a completely different universe. Now, don't get me wrong, under the hood, Redshift was an absolute beast. It had this incredibly sophisticated, massively parallel architecture that could just chew through petabytes of data. But here was the magic trick. You, the user, never had to see any of it. All that complexity was hidden away, so you could just focus on your data. So when you take that relentless focus on simplicity, and you combine it with being a cloud-native, managed service, well, you start to see some really powerful results that traditional software just couldn't touch. These two charts right here tell such a cool story. On the left, you can see that Redshift was adding new features at a dizzying pace. But then, look at the chart on the right. At the exact same time, the number of serious problems reported by customers was actually going down. I mean, how is that even possible? How do you get more features and more stability at the same time? The answer is the managed service model. Because Amazon was operating thousands of these Redshift clusters, they could spot a problem on one customer's system, figure out the root cause, fix it, and then deploy that fix to the entire fleet automatically. The whole service just got better, faster, and more reliable every single week, and the customer didn't have to lift a finger. So, what are the big lessons we can pull from this story? First, success isn't always about having the most powerful tech. It's about making powerful tech accessible to everyone. Second, competing against people who are doing nothing, that non-consumption, is often a way bigger opportunity than fighting over existing customers. And finally, when you automate all that grunt work, what the paper calls undifferentiated heavy lifting, you free up your users to focus on the one thing that actually matters, their data. So when you boil it all down, what's the big takeaway? We tend to think of disruption as some groundbreaking new technology or a crazy business model. But the story of Redshift really makes you wonder, maybe the most powerful, most disruptive feature of all is just making things simple. Thanks for watching.